Welcome to the Fearless Females Voice podcast, where women's stories and experiences are shared in order to empower and inspire others. Before we begin the podcast, I wanted to let you know that there is a free Becoming Fearless test on my website which will take less than 5 minutes to complete. This test will show you how fearless you are and give you some great tips and techniques at the end on how you can become more fearless. You can check this out on www.fearlessfemales.me. On this episode, I am joined by Shay Stone, who is an author, life coach, and animator at Walt Disney. From a young age, Shay was curious-minded about how people think and behave. This led her to reflect on her own thoughts and behaviours and understand beyond the surface of herself. She started digging deeper and asking questions to herself to unlock her true potential. Her curiosity led her to coaching and empowering others, along with writing her book, Be Better Than You. This book is a guide on how to take your life to the next level through doing the inner work. On this episode, Shay talks us through her career and the challenges women face, especially women of colour. She talks about the deep internal work that she did, why she did it, the benefits she discovered, how her confidence increased through knowing herself, and more about her incredible book. This was such an interesting conversation, and I loved hearing from someone who knows himself so well and has had many life experiences. I know you'll love the listen, so without further ado, let's get stuck in. Shay, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And you are an author, a life coach, and an animator at Walt Disney. So very impressive, and a lady of many talents. So there definitely must have been some fearless actions going in on that, because I can imagine that being a journey to get to where you are. So can you tell me, what does being a fearless female mean to you?
For me, the first thing that comes to mind is the word deep. Like when I think about a fearless female, and obviously, I consider myself one as well, but because simply being a female, honestly, is in the eyes of society, you're starting 100 steps behind, right? To be a fearless female, you have to have gone through a world of second guessing, frustration, and fear in itself, really, right? And in this, you also processed your experiences thoroughly enough to generate a level of self-awareness that forces you to question what's normal or why normal is normal, right? Thinking about the large expectations there are on women in general, how to conduct ourselves, how to act, how to dress. There are even stereotypes on what we should be afraid of, right? When we should be confident and aggressive or even submissive. And with those expectations, in a way, there's kind of like consequences to that, right? And if you don't concede to it. So that in itself creates a fearful woman, right? So to be fearless, you have to have gone through your own journey, with tunnel vision, right? Excluding anything outside of yourself and your desires. Taking all of your experiences and what you've learned from them and developing your own line of expectations, right? And ways to behave in a way that's advantageous for you. So when I think about the word deep, it's because the process demands the inner dialogue. It demands you to do the work. It demands you to execute, and it demands you to take risks and go through that cycle over and over again, right? So that's what makes a fearless female. Although obviously, fearlessness doesn't truly exist, right? So even for me, it's you still feel fear, you still go through insecurities, right? You learn how to manage it. So
absolutely. I love that. And I feel like exactly what you said at the end is about fear. You're still feeling the fear because it's a cycle. It's something that you come across and then you can overcome it. And then you're back to that stage, or then expanding your comfort zone, you're back into the fear zone. And it's a cycle. It's something that we will naturally go through. So I completely agree with that. One thing that you said there about being fearless is that women step into something 100 steps back, was it? So we are kind of almost entering something already 100 steps back. Can you elaborate on that? What is it that you meant by that?
Yeah, sure. I think, like I said, in the eyes of society, right? So you have the man and woman, right? Men get, obviously they're things are more beneficial for them, like stepping into the world. It's like, you're a man, you're confident, you're supposed to do this, you're powerful, you're the one who runs the business and things like that. Where women, it's harder for us to get to that level, right? So we can, and it's still happening, even with wages and things like that, or positions of power, right? It's really hard for us women to not even prove ourselves, but just have that respect, right? And be judged on merit and not our gender, right? And not what our roles are supposed to be, or not what our roles are, like even convenience for the company, or just and when I say convenience, I mean convenience for ego, right? Like we're kind of like characters in it, like we've been painted as characters in a way, especially in the business world, right? Corporate America, or just a corporate world in general, where it's really tough for us to just do the same things a man does, or even be more skilled or more talented, or more equipped for whatever role, right? There's like, we have to do more, right? So it's like no matter what you do, you're 100 steps behind when it comes to man and woman and the gender roles in the corporate world, and trying to get to the same level, right? We can have the talent, we can have what it takes, we can have the confidence, and we have our knowledge, right? But we still have to give a little bit extra. We still have to think about what else can we do to challenge just the bare minimum of a man, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I had a very similar conversation with someone earlier on around women in the workplace, because I worked in the engineering industry for 8 years. So it was very heavily male dominated. I was pretty much the only woman on the scene. And I've experienced all of that, because I was just saying to this girl I was speaking to earlier that it comes from, okay, I'm a woman in the workplace, and I'm also a woman of color in the workplace. So it's almost like the two areas, which for me didn't really work to my favor, or everything that you've just said. I've experienced the biases, and I had to work that extra bit harder. I felt for myself to prove that I deserve to be there. I deserve to be in these positions that I had ambition to go into. So completely agree with that. And I think it's something that I've experienced as well. So let's take it to you being an animator at Walt Disney.
Yeah.
I actually, when I heard you were doing that for 11 years now, is it? You're
11 years. Yeah.
That is it sounds like you're extremely creative. I've seen some of the projects people won't be able to actually see this who's listening in, but it looks like you've worked on some incredible projects. And I'd love to know more about how did you actually get into that?
Sure. So for me, I've wanted to be an animator since I was 7 years old, right? So I used to draw Disney characters all the time. I used to watch Disney movies all the time, and that was my thing. I would draw them. My brother, he used to actually force me to draw, because he liked to draw, right? So my brother was 10 years older than me. So he liked to draw, so I would just do what he did, right? And then it got to the point where he stopped drawing. He lost interest for it, and I didn't. I just kept doing it, right? And I just got fascinated with it, right? And it got to the point where I was even trying to create flip books. They were horrible, but I was like, I wanted to make my drawings move, right? So I just kept at it. When Toy Story came out, that's when it hit me. I was like, I want to do that, right? Whatever that is. I didn't know animation specifically, but I knew I loved drawing. I knew I loved making my drawings move. And then I saw Toy Story, and it just, like, the energy just resonated, right? Like, it all connected, because I was only 7, 8 years old, maybe even getting to 9 and 10 at the time. I didn't know what that was, but I just knew it all connected somehow. And I was like, this is it. Like, I just felt the love, and like, it was just, I just wanted it all with all my heart, right? It was just, I just felt this passion. I was like, I want to do that. And so that's kind of how it started. That's the base camp of it. And my mom, luckily, she was very beautiful and just allowing me to explore as a child. So she knew I loved animation. She knew I loved drawing, right? And she didn't try to stick me to it. Like, so I got into a space where I played basketball. I used to I was in the band. I liked doing hair. And like, I just went through all these different extracurricular activities that I loved, right? And, but in 9th grade, when I was about 13 years old, we had a class project, and the project was about finding what you want to do when you grow up, right? And when that conversation came and that project came, I went back to animation. So I started looking up schools and things like that. And I found the school that I actually went to. So at the age of 13, I even knew like what college I wanted to go to. I knew about animation at that point, right? I knew what kind of studios I wanted. I wanted to work at Disney. Like I had it all figured out at the age of 13. Wow. And yeah, and once I went to Full Sail, I actually didn't know anything about it. So at 13, once I did that project, as far as finding what animation was and the schools to go to, that was it. Like I actually didn't do any more research after that. So the next time I did anything that was related to animation was when I went to school for it. So that was kind of like a challenge in itself, because I knew I loved it. I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't know anything about it. So it was kind of like I was getting thrown into the fire at that point. So it was very challenging.
You know, it's really rare that it's great that you've found something you're so passionate about. And it's very rare that I hear women who say, yes, we knew this from, 7, 8 years old, from 13 years old, that this is what we wanted to do. And they're continuing in it. And, you talked about the passion for it. I've literally just seen a massive smile on your face whilst you've been talking for the last few minutes. And I'm like, she definitely loves this. Like you are in love with it. So you can clearly see that it's a no-brainer that this is definitely the path for you. So it's really nice that you were able to find that from a young age and pursue it and get to where you are now.
Yeah. And it's tough, and so when I was talking about being a fearless female, it's like, I understand what you have to go through to get to that point of being considered fearless, right? People consider me fearless, and obviously that's not true. I do still feel that stuff, but you just learn how to manage it. You learn, and you have to go through that inner dialogue, that work, take risk, execute, and then kind of go through that cycle over and over again and thoroughly and learn from it, right? It's a lot of what I talk about in my book as well, is kind of laying it all out, looking at the situation as it is, and then try to view it from different perspectives and reflect too, right? And when you do that, you start to find the answer, right? Instead of just freaking out about what's going on, it's like, let's jump into this, let's break it down, let's think about ourselves and how we feel, and the answer is going to come, right? There is no one answer, but the answer is going to come. You're going to figure out how to behave and how to conduct yourself in a way that's more advantageous for you, right? And that advantageous could be emotionally, it could be you getting what you want, it can be within negotiations, it could be how to interact with someone better that's more beneficial for you and them. Like that advantageous word is like it's spread out throughout, right? Just so I know what that I went through that. So it's when I think about another female who's doing the same type of things, it's like, I know what you had to go through, and it wasn't easy, right? It wasn't easy. Like you had to do deep work. You have to go through a lot of confusion and frustration and just even a lack of confidence. Like and so to get to that point, it's like where you're considered fearless. It's like, that's a lie. Like, it's like just thinking about someone's journey and seeing someone acting and obviously we don't get a lot of credit, right? Females don't get a lot of credit when they're super confident, when they're doing their thing, when they're at the top of their game. They don't get a lot of credit. It's like, it's more so let's pull them down, right? Like, oh, you need to get off your high horse, or, oh, you need to calm down. You need to be in your place or stay in your lane. And it's like, people don't really realize what you had to go through to get there, right? Because that's hard to fake too.
They'll see that end goal and be like, oh, she made it. But those challenges, the struggles that you get to that point, that's something that people don't always see. Right. And also respect. It's just something that you've worked your way through, and not everyone can do that. So that's the key point.
Not everyone can do that, right?
Absolutely. And it sounds like in your career there have been some struggles or blockers, let's say. Is there some examples that you can tell us around what happened and how you overcame them?
I mean, luckily in my industry, there hasn't been too many situations where I felt lackluster or felt like I was not taken seriously or anything like that. I will say that it's tough just in general, like you said, being a woman and being a woman of color. Like every studio I've ever worked at, I'm one of very few, if not the only Black woman, right? And even just woman in general, I'm one of few, right? But then when you go Black woman, it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're one of one, right? So that in itself, it's tough, but I've worked hard at my craft, right? So with that being said, it's like, I don't feel like, trying to say two things at once. Nowadays, things are going to diversity, right? People are diversity inclusion. So people are, trying to, be more participate in that more, right? Which is great. But at the same time, for women of color or people of color in general, it can feel like charity a little bit, right? Because it's like, are you hiring me for merit, or are you hiring me to fit your rainbow?
Yeah.
Right. So although companies doing this and trying to participate and trying to be more diverse is very heartwarming, and it's very good for our society, and it's meaningful. But at the same time, if that's the goal, it doesn't make the other person feel so good, right? So for me, saying that nowadays, it's like, I am cognizant of that, which a lot of people of color are cognizant of that now. It's like, why are you hiring me, right? But for me, I would say that although I'm cognizant of it, I have worked at my craft quite a bit, so it's easier for me to say they're hiring me over merit, right? They're hiring me because I'm good at what I do, right? I put a lot of time into what I do. Going back before diversity inclusion was, such as big as it is now, I would say there was always a little bit of discomfort, but at the same time, it was good too, right? So a little bit of discomfort being the only woman or being the only woman of color in a studio. I didn't feel like I was getting treated differently. But there was still a little bit of discomfort knowing that you are the only one, right? And you did have to stay cognizant of if you are, right? So you did have to be aware just to make sure that, hey, am I getting treated differently? Am I not getting the same opportunities other people are getting? If someone becomes like a lead animator, or someone gets a better shot than I do, and I notice that I'm only getting certain shots that are super easy, or in our industry, crowd shots kind of suck. Like if you get crowds, it's like, you're not really that great, right? So if I'm always getting crowd shots or something like that, and I'm just like, well, I'm better than this, right? I shouldn't be getting crowd shots. And this person I think I'm better than this person, and he's not getting crowd shots. If that's never really been the case, but you are aware of it, like you are on top of things, which is, I don't know, it's kind of uncomfortable in a sense that you even have to think about that. But personally, I've never experienced something based off just being a female or being a person of color in this industry, which I think speaks volumes, even though I've still been aware of it.
And it's interesting you said the point about when we're comparing, oh, this person's got this new assignment and I didn't get it. Why is that? Whereas what I've come across is, and I felt this in the past as well as a woman, I sometimes think to myself, oh, I can't do everything for that assignment. And I kind of hold myself back from it. And I've had these kind of insecurities or blockers. And it's something that resonates with a lot of females, that we do this to ourselves, to be like, oh, I can't go for that job promotion because I can't do X, Y, Z. Whereas the guy next to me who's the same level as me is like, oh, I can do it. And he just kind of wings it and gets there, even though he's the same level, same experience, same everything. And I've had to overcome that barrier for myself to go for these roles, to actually be heard, to be like, actually, hang on, I can do this too. Because the gender pay gap, I've experienced it in my career. So that's something that I can say I've experienced. And this is, I think, something that women in general need to work on. And it's all about, as you talked about, mindset, self-belief, understanding that you can actually get to that position. It's something that you can do. You mentioned that people think you're fearless. And it's that self-belief that I can do it. Because you've just said to me as well that you've got that confidence knowing that you're getting the job for the right reasons. I've been in a position where I was like, getting a job, and I'm like, am I just getting hired because I'm brown and I'm a woman? Like, and there's no women or brown people on this team. I do think, like, is that the case? But yeah,
and that's valid. And like I said before, that creates a level of discomfort a little bit, right? So you can so even though I do have that confidence that, okay, it's about merit, it's about the quality of my work, that other thing is still in the back of my mind. Like, is it even a little bit of that? So that part does suck, being in the workplace as a female, as a woman of color, and just wondering that, right? That sucks that we even have to wonder that, where men don't, right? Or people of non-color people, whatever, they don't have to worry about that. That's a privilege not to have to wonder, right? Even if it's not a thing, even if you don't actually think that, it's like just to even have that, to consider that sucks, right? And people don't really understand the depths of how much that does, right? So it's like, I wish I could not think about that. I wish I could not consider that, right? So yeah. No, that's a big thing, but yeah, luckily, like I said, it is about the mindset, right? It is about understanding who you are, to gain that confidence. And I think what you said before is like, why am I not getting this? Or I can't go for this job. But then the other person is like, I'll go for that job. It's a confidence thing, right? Because obviously there's no difference between you, but there is a difference between you, right? There's no difference in what's on paper, but there's a difference between what's going on the inside, right? So for anything, and I tell people all the time, the more you understand yourself, the more you're going to understand everything, right? Right. The more you have yourself in check, the more you're going to have everything around you in check, right? So a lot of my confidence is because I know myself so well, right? So it's easy for me to step into places that I don't know anything about. It's easy for me to go full on things I don't know anything about. I mean, honestly, even writing a book, that's something I've never done before, right? But if you know yourself, then it's, like I said, you will, this is why I put so much focus on reflecting with the book. I put so much focus on going through it slowly, right? And really digesting what's in there and it's not a read through once. It's not a one-off type of book, right? It's not like, okay, go buy spinach, eggs, and this, and then eat that for 2 weeks, and then you're going to lose 10 pounds and then you're done, right? It's not that kind of book, right? So it's going to take a while to get through. And the reason why is because I understand the importance and the power in knowing who you are, or understanding who you are. Actually, I don't even like the word knowing, understanding who you are, right? Because you have to go through a certain level of work to get to have that understanding, right? And so the more you start seeing it in yourself, it's gonna mirror around you, because we're all the same, right? Life is filled with nothing new. We're all a rendition of the same exact thing. So absolutely. You can't understand other people. You can't assume other people's position, but you can get to know yours, and then you'll start to. It's like when you watch. It's really like a genre, to be honest. It's like you watch a movie and you're like, oh, okay, I know what kind of movie this is because I've seen other movies like this, right? Oh, I know we can predict what's gonna happen at the end of a movie, right? Or at the end of a scary movie. We kind of know what's gonna happen. We know what scary movies are about. We know it's gonna be like, oh, it's gonna be some weird chick, and then there's gonna be like killings, and there's gonna be like scary, people coming from behind the door. Even if we're not exactly right, in our minds, we can familiarize ourselves with what's going to happen, right? So it's the same thing with understanding who you are. So the more you understand who you are, you'll start to see things bleed out of other people, where you're like, okay, yeah, I see, I got that. You'll start to make these connections just like you would in the movies. Yeah, you may not be exactly right, like on the nail, because you don't know everybody and their story, but you'll start to put things together in such a beautiful way that you can start taking things to your outside world to your advantage. And that's where your power is, right? So, and I think it's, for me, it's, it kind of seems, I think I talk about it I touch on it in the book a little bit, where it seems manipulative, right? But understanding who you are is a power, because first of all, a lot of people won't do the work. They just won't, right? Even when it comes to something you are successful at, or say you started a business, or you figured out the secret sauce to something. I'm the type of person where I don't mind telling you what the secret is, right? I don't mind telling you exactly what I did, because more often than not, you're not going to do the work to get it, to even get to that result, right? So it's okay. So it's the same thing with understanding who you are. A lot of people aren't going to do the work. So that's really where your power is, because you understand that, okay, a lot of people don't have a lot of self-awareness because they don't know who they are. So it's easy. So when it comes to, like, say, for instance, negotiation, it's easy to it's easy to take advantage of that, right? Right. Especially when you're talking about the workplace, right? So, so it's like I said, it really is so important to do that work and have that dialogue and go about it obsessively. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Now, as I say, you mentioned that you know yourself or you understand yourself really well. And I agree with this is something that not many people do the work to put in the work to understand themselves. It's one of those situations that you talked about where you do, let's say, read a book or go on a program, watch a TV documentary, and you take in this knowledge. But then it comes to, okay, you've taken it in. Now what's next? Are you going to action this? Are you going to work on this? Or are you just going to take it in? And I can say I'm a culprit of this as well. There's been times in the past where I've read books and I'm thinking, oh, this is amazing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build my new habit, whatever it is. And then I just kind of forget and I don't actually do the work. And that's something that now I've changed my reflection period once I do take in information and process it in a different way so that I'm actually gaining benefit from it as opposed to just getting some knowledge. But you mentioned that you know yourself really well. Can I ask, how is it that you've come to that position? Because it's a very difficult place that not many people are in that position of knowing themselves to that certain extent of self-awareness that you mentioned. So how did you get there?
Right. So I would say the first word is observation. Right. So I've had a habit of observing people since I was a kid as well. Right. But I would observe people around me. Okay. So like I would observe my mom, my aunts, sister, brother, dad, whoever, right. Friends, even. And it was fun for me. It was a habit. So it wasn't a chore. Right. It wasn't something I felt like I had to do. I was a child. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that watching people was fun and figuring out why they did the things that they did was fun. Right. So I would even play Barbies and reenact situations that I've seen. Right. And it doesn't matter if the situation was good or bad. Wasn't even registering in my mind, but I would I would go play Barbies and I wouldn't just play Barbies, just of course there's little imagination, but I would be reenacting interactions like between my mom and my aunt, mom, dad, friends, or maybe an interaction that I had with a friend. And that Barbie, one of the Barbies would be the friend and one of the Barbies would be me. And as I'm kind of playing it, obviously when you're playing Barbies, there is a little bit of imagination. So when you're saying what the other person said to you, so say if the person's name, we'll just say Barbie. So say if your friend's name is Barbie, right? And then you have Shay over here. So it's like, okay, well, in real life, like this actually, it happened, during school or something like that. So Barbie said this to Shay, and then Shay's like, I say the same thing as Shay. And then there's a little bit of imagination that comes in to where I'm thinking as myself, right? So I'm like, okay, this is not exactly what was said. I'm just kind of going with the flow. And then I have to think of myself as Barbie, right? As the person who said what they said. And now I have to put myself in their mind because that's not exactly what they did or said, but I'm playing, right? It's imagination. I'm just kind of going with the flow. I'm reenacting the scene, but I'm doing it in a very lively way. My point in saying that is that I get into the mind of that person. So I don't just play Barbies as Barbies. I assign them like a certain character. And it's the same actually in animation. Like I'm really kind of describing animation in the same sense, because to animate a character, you have to get into the mind of the character. You can't pretend you're the character. If that makes sense. You have to be the character. Like pretending is not enough. And it's the same as acting in general. Like Denzel Washington, like that's not how he acts in real life. He has to become whatever character he's playing. And you believe it so much that, and we believe it so much in general with actors that we call them their character's name in real life. Yeah. Right. So like, for instance, I love the show Friends. I don't call Jennifer Aniston. I call her Rachel. Yeah. Right. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's who she is to me. Like she played it so well. She got into that character. She was Rachel. Right. So I would play Barbies as a kid in the same manner. So I would be that person and reenact those situations and then obviously exaggerate it in my own right. So point of saying that, as far as getting to know myself, because I had this habit for so long as a kid, and it just got really strong, right? I was obsessed about it. I loved figuring out why people did things that they did and what the outcome was. And then I would think about the outcome that people had, and I would try to piece it together. I'm like, all right, well, how did that happen that way? What are the other ways that could have happened? Like, what are the other outcomes that could have happened if they did this, this, and this? Psychopath type stuff. Like I would go crazy just thinking about very little details of other people's situations. So I'm going to fast forward as far as knowing myself. When I got to college, it was very competitive, like a very competitive school. And I saw that. like right away, right? So I was about 18 years old at the time. So I saw that and I was just like, oh, this is not going to work out, right? Because I knew what my dream was, to be an animator, right? I knew it was going to take a lot for me to get there, but I also observed how competitive and nervous and like just do whatever it takes to win attitude that people had, right? So I'm just like, okay, well, this is not going to work for me. So this was actually the turning point for me as far as like, all right, Shay, all that stuff you've done, it's time to turn your attention toward yourself, right? So when I was in college is really when I learned the most about myself. Like I took all of the attention that I had since I was a kid, observing other people, reenacting scenarios with Barbies and all types of different things. I got all of that and put it in myself. Right. So this got to a point where I was just reflecting all the time, asking myself questions all the time, sitting with uncomfortable situations. Right. So even if I did something embarrassing, I would go home, or depending on where I'm at, and just feel it. Like just make myself feel it. Like don't run away from it. Like, oh, that, like, you know, when you say like, oh, that's cringing, I don't want to think about it. No, I would think about it. Right. And I would just not even shame myself. And I'm not saying it in that moment to shame myself, but I'm just like, I would sit with it and interact with it. Right. And say, why do you feel this way? What happened that made you so uncomfortable? At what point did your emotions start to turn? Right. And just continuously asking these probing questions and getting myself to answer them, whether it was verbally or just thinking about it in my head. But I would give myself time to go through these processes until I was okay. Right. So until I had a solution in any aspect. So until I was just like, okay, well, and it's not even about whose fault or anything like that. It's like, okay, well, this is what needs to happen next time for you to feel comfortable. Or maybe, you know, you didn't have a role in this but this is just how it played out. Okay, well, if this is how it played out and I didn't have a role in it, or it wasn't my fault. Okay, well, how could I make sure, even if it's not my fault in the future, that this still doesn't happen? Right. So I would just kind of go down that laundry list of questioning to get myself to a point where it's better for me in the future. Right. So this is why I said about the fearless female, there's a deep process that you have to go through, and you're going to go through it over and over and over again to the point where everything you do is advantageous for you. Right. So learning myself is just about that. It's about questioning, and it's all in this bubble of reflection. But I think people don't really understand how much you need to reflect. Like you have to reflect. It's not just about thinking about what happened. You have to have a purpose, right? You have to reflect with purpose and say, okay, this is how I felt. This is how I don't want to feel. I understand that I felt this way, but I don't want to feel that. How can I avoid feeling that way in the future if something relatable happens that way, right? How can I pick up on this emotion before it even gets to an outcome? How can I pick up on something that's happening before it's done happening, before it even gets to that point, right? So the work, it sounds like a lot, and I mean, and it really is, but the more you do it, it's like, it's seamlessly, right? So for now, I mean, I'm constantly self-monitoring, right? And that's just, it's natural for me. So I'm constantly reflecting. Even during this conversation, I'm monitoring myself. I'm reflecting on what we said before. And it's just, but it's not homework for me. Like, it's natural. So when you get into a point where we talk about the workplace and negotiations, it's easy for me to take the lead on that, right? Our interviews, for instance, a lot of people are nervous during interviews. I'm not nervous during interviews because I know how to guide that in my direction, right? Or in my advantage, right? So this is why I just say, like, understanding who you are, it's so powerful. Yes, it takes a lot, but it's so damn worth it. Like, once you start to see, like, and when I was younger too, even at Full Sail in college, I started to see what that was doing for me. So yes, it was a lot, but I started to see the results of that. And the more I started to see results from it, the more I just got really obsessed about it, like greedy with it, right? Because I'm just like, I started like calling shots, right, before they happen, right? And obviously I had an advantage because this is something I did my whole life. This is my life work as far as observing other people, right? So I knew what to look out for just within myself. And I just had to be open to accept whatever feeling that was. But once you start to like, you get a different perspective on the outside world when you understand yourself. And when you start seeing that you can literally drive things your way, it's like, yeah, you get really confident, right? And you do get fearless because it's like, you're like, I can go into this place and I can take control, right? I can walk into this room and I can dominate the room, right? And it's really rewarding. It's really rewarding. And this is why I'm just obsessive about obviously this book and the way that I went about it in a certain manner. But this is why I push self-reflection so much and understanding who you are, and not just knowing who you are, not your name, right? So knowing your name is Shandy and my name is Shay, like that's not enough, right? There's a lot of people named Shay. That doesn't tell you anything about yourself. So, and that doesn't give you any power. And I'm all for empowering others because I've witnessed it. I've experienced it.
That is really, really powerful. And you said you started that from 18 to do self-reflection work. And a lot of women I speak to now who are in their late 20s, early 30s, even in their 40s, they want to reflect, but they just do not know how. And you, from that age, were asking yourself these deep, as you said before, deep questions to try and understand why things are happening the way they are. What's your thinking process? How can you prevent this? How did you know from that young age that that's the kind of questions to ask yourself?
Well, that's the kind of questions I would ask about other people, right?
Okay.
So, yeah. So observing others, these are the questions I would have about that. So playing the Barbies is when I would process this, right? So I'm just like, I could see something that happened and know the outcome, or maybe not even know the outcome. But once I reenact it, this is when I'm starting to internalize it, right? So the questions, I'm like, okay, well, Barbie did say that, but why would she say that, right? So, and that would put me and it's the same, like I said, it's the same thing as far as actors are concerned and animators, but it's like, why would she say that? And then you start thinking like her and you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe she's feeling this way and that's why she said it like that. So if that's the case, this is what she would say. Now, this is what she would say now, even though she didn't say it in real life. This is what she would say now because I just processed why she may have said what she said and why she said it the way she said it. Okay, so that must have been it. And then we go to the next thing they said. And then I go through that same process, right? So when I was reenacting as a kid, this is where like these are the questions I was asking, and rapidly. So like I said, this wasn't like a long thing, which it sounds. I understand how it sounds, but it wasn't a long thing. So when it came to myself, I knew what questions to ask because this is what I would do, outside for other people as well.
Okay. And you've touched on your book many, many times throughout this podcast, and I want to hear more about it. I literally, now is the time. I need to hear more about it. What was the whole process like of writing your book, getting your thoughts out onto paper and having it published and now out?
Right. Yeah, that was interesting because I never actually set out to write a book. Right. So I never had any experience as a writer or anything like that. I never used to read books like that before. Obviously, I'm more avid now. But so when I had the idea to write it, I was like, okay, well, there's a lot of things we need to figure out first. Right. So I was like, all right, we need to figure out. I started looking at other books. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, first of all, let me backtrack a little bit. I had to figure out what I was going to write about. Right. So I understood, why I wanted to write a book. I wanted to help people. I wanted to help empower others, right, to become the leader of their own life, despite what happens in the physical world. Right. I don't want my mission is like where I don't want people to have to worry about what's happening outside of themselves to get what they want. Right. I don't care what you want. To get what you want, I want it to just be about you. Right. So if this happens and like if you're trying to get from point A to point Z, but then all these other things happen, I want you to have the confidence. I want you to have the clarity, the understanding, the guts, all that kind of stuff to still get there no matter what. By yourself. Like, this is all about you. So sure, you'll have support, you have help from other people. All that stuff is great, but it should be an addition. Right. I want people to get what they want out of life on their own. I want them to feel confident. I want them to feel just as powerful as they are. We are extremely powerful. So that was the whole purpose around me writing this book. Cause I'm like, I have to share this because I feel like I felt selfish a little bit, right? Cause I did feel like I am the type of person to get whatever I want. And I feel like I've gotten the things that I want in life, right? I've been extremely blessed. And so I'm just like, I want other people to experience that, right? So the first thing is like, okay, well, what are we going to talk about? What is it? So I've never had to think about what to write or how to, like, subconsciously, things that I do subconsciously. I'm like, I can't just tell people, oh, just do what I do, right? Or, oh, just think positive, or, oh, just whatever. I knew that couldn't have been it because there's a lot of things that happen. So I had to I had to do a lot of work just with that, just figuring out what to write, how to write it, like how are we going to direct this to get them to understand what I'm trying to say. So I had to do a lot of work as far as like thinking about the things that I do subconsciously. Right. And that's very hard, thinking about the things you do subconsciously. So I would write. So I started off just writing down just random thoughts. And then I would just sit with those thoughts. And if I thought that was it, like, I'm like, okay, well, that's part of what I do. That makes sense. Then I would keep it. Right. And then I would just kind of go through this process where I'm just writing down random thoughts. Once I did that, then I started reading books. Right. So I started reading books to understand, like, okay, the rhythm, the cadence, the wording, vocabulary, figuring out how the vocabulary and how people wrote their books resonated with me first. And then that would kind of give me an idea. I started to learn how I should write my own book. Like, okay, this makes sense because I'm reading like really good books, right? Like classics, and then figuring out how, like, the way they write their sentences, grammar, like what stuck out to me as far as how to write this, right? I'm even spacing, I'm a very obsessive person. So even just looking at spacing, like, I want to space it this way. So, right. Like, if you look at my book, there's a lot of like 3-liners, 1-liners here, maybe there's a long paragraph somewhere, and that's okay. But it was all thought out because I wanted to break it up that way, right? I wanted you to read it a certain way, because when I read other books, I found that I took it in better when it was spaced like this, right? Or whatever the case is, or the certain wording. I'm like, okay, this is good, right? Or bold letters, for instance, like, this is how deep it went. So, yeah, once I kind of did that, figured out what I wanted to write, kind of figured out what I was doing on a subconscious level and what direction I wanted to go, I started reading these books and starting to figure out the rhythm. And then I just started writing, right? Just started going from there. After I broke everything down, it's like, okay, how are the chapters going to go, right? When do I want somebody to read a certain thing? So, like, in my book, for instance, for me, the best chapter is the chapter proactive, but proactive is not until like later in the book, because in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, there's certain things we need to do first. So self-reflection is actually the first chapter, right? So I'm like, okay, we need to open that door first. And then we're going to talk about goals, and then we're going to talk about health. We're going to talk about toxicity, and then we'll talk about the real deal. Right now, this is where we'll start talking about proactiveness, thinking positive, what that means. We'll talk about ignorance, everything that goes into that, right? Being present. Like, there was a process as far as how I wanted to direct and hopefully get somebody to the point where they feel empowered and, and they've kind of unlocked a whole new world for themselves.
Amazing. If you had to summarize your book in one sentence, what would you say?
I would say the book is about demonstrating how you have everything you need to take your life to the next level.
Wow, that's amazing. Is it targeted at women specifically?
No. So this was actually targeted to young adults, to be honest with you. Like, when I first wrote it, it was to jumpstart young adults and get them to the point where, like, they don't have to waste decades of their life trying to figure out the hard stuff, right? So I even talk about a little bit of finance in there, right? So initially it was directed towards young adults starting like maybe like 20, 21, stuff like that. But as I continued to write, I was just like, okay, well, this is for older people as well, right? Like, that was jump starting young adults was the initial goal, but and even with the feedback that I've received so far, people read it and it's like, I understand this is why you wrote it, but I think this book is for everybody.
Yeah, it sounds like a kind of step-by-step, always guiding you through the journey of self-discovery. So it definitely sounds like it's definitely relevant for many, many people. Oh, yeah, so it will be very beneficial.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, amazing. And so tell me,
for sure. So,
what is next for you? What are next steps in life, in your career, in anything?
Right. Right. Yeah, I can't really say right now because I don't want to ruin it. But yeah, it's exciting. I'm going to be doing more with Be Better Than You. So Be Better Than You, the book, like, it's meant to be a foundation, right? So this is another reason why I've gone through so many different areas in the book, right? Because it's like self-reflection, finance, toxic people, health, being present. Like we hit a lot of different avenues in this book. Like it's jam-packed and we go everywhere, right? Strategically, but we do go everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to be diving deeper now.
Into one of those areas?
Yeah, into each area, right?
Oh, into like, each area?
But into each area, but in a creative way. Yeah.
Okay. Which one of those topics that you've mentioned from your book would you say is the most important? Just curious.
I would say self-reflection and proactive.
And proactive. Okay, so that's at the start and kind of, you said chapter 10 or roughly at the end, right?
Yeah, I think it's about chapter 6 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so proactive is near the back, but I would say those two are the most important to me. Now, I've heard different things from people who've already read it. So some people will say, I love the finance chapter, like I took the most out of that, right? Or whatever. Ignorance is a big one too. That people are like, yeah, I got a lot out of that, right? But for me, I would say self-reflection and proactive because they're based off of understanding. Right. So we're kind of laying down groundwork and it's very thought provoking. Like I even talk about creativity in the proactive chapter, right? How we're all creative and, and kind of throw things out there to make you think to yourself. Right. It's a very thought provoking book. And that's something me and my team, like we were very serious about. Like I would say certain things in a way just to make you think. Like, so there's moments in there where I don't give you the answer, right? It's just for you to do your own thing, right? And you're gonna, and it's stimulating. So it's not like I leave you out into the woods, right? Right. So no, it's not thought provoking in that way, but I'll talk about certain things and then I'll kind of hook my own story to it, right? And then just kind of leave it there for you, right? So it's very detailed, but like I said, it is thought provoking because it's about self-discovery, right? So. Yeah, it's really beautiful. It just, in my humble opinion, that it's not tactical as far as like do this, do that, and then like I say, you lose 10 pounds in a week, or this is what's going to be the result next week, kind of thing. It's not that kind of book, and I think it's very beautiful that it's not that kind of book because that's what we're missing. We're missing stimulation. We're missing insight. We're missing intuition, right? We're missing understanding. We're missing the know-how, the know what to do. Right. We're constantly asking people what to do. Like when things happen in the world, we're constantly thinking like, oh, let me look up what to do, or let me watch the news so people can tell us what to do. Like, what's the next step? And we just don't know. And I don't like that. I don't want that for us. So that's why the book is definitely a thought-provoking type of book. And it's not like I'm going to do it for you. It's like I'm walking with you kind of thing.
That sounds right up my street because I agree with that. There's elements of looking to the outside world, to your friends, family, wherever it is for answers. When actually sometimes you just need to look within and see what is actually going on. What is it that I feel? What is it that I want? And this is something that I talk to women about as well. It's just the inner work that really, really helps. And it'll help you shine through and figure out what it is that you actually truly want. So right. It'll help you shine. Yeah, no, I like that. The book sounds incredible. I
sure hope so. I put a lot of work into it and I'm excited about it. And I'm more excited just about the feedback that it's received. So hopefully it does exactly what I intended it for it to do. And that's to just help people and empower others and help them find their way. So.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback so far from what you said sounds great as well. So we tell the listeners, how can they find you?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at shaystone.s. You can find me on BeBetterThanYou.com, and all the information that you'll need and to get in contact with me are just to follow me and interact and share your story. I mean, I love to hear things too. So if people read the book and they want to chat about it, I love it. Or people just want to share their story in general. I love hearing success stories. I love hearing self-development stories, inner work stories. Like that kind of stuff is very exciting to me. So. Find me on those two platforms.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Shay, for coming on this podcast. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Oh yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Fearless Females Voice podcast. Be sure to complete the free Fearless test where you can discover how to increase your confidence, build your resilience and self-love. You can find this test on my website, which is www.fearlessfemales.me. And to connect with other like-minded females, make sure you join our Facebook group, which is called Fearless Females. Oh, and one last thing. I'd like you to do a massive favor for me. If you enjoyed this episode, then be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you.